What kind of corn is that that's so tall?
That's just field corn, like you feed livestock. Now part of it is that down there is the field corn. I got some over here it's like that red Indian corn. My brother James sent me the seed for that, and I just thought I'd plant a couple of rows of it. So, man, it's tall. I mean, some of the ears you just barely can't touch the ears. But the beans right here, I planted 4 rows, and I done the TP.
How much time did you spend putting your teepees up?
Oh, I was down here for a week probably. I mean, you got the little sticks here that you put up here, and I just took a screw and tied them together, or screwed them together. Then you got one stick that goes across the top, and then you got 2 at the bottom. You know, one across on each side at the bottom, and then you tie strings from the top to the bottom. And boy, I tied strings till I was sick of tying strings. And the beans, I pretty much have picked this whole thing, this 1 row or 2 row combination here, and I have picked over that one at least once, but you can tell by looking, it's still full of beans. And these runner beans have got to have something to climb. If you don't, they just all over the ground, and you don't end up with anything. The rabbits eat them, and you know they get the blight and everything else. So they have to have something to run up. And a lot of older people, they planted in their corn because you know they always had corn, and it gave the beans something really good to climb up. Now I don't know that you would want to plant it in that 16-foot tall corn over there.
Because they'll climb as high as the pole is, right?
That's something else I was going to say. Don't make your trellis or whatever you got your beans on. Don't make them no higher than you can reach. Cause some of them right there, I can't hardly reach them. My grandpa, my mom's dad, Arthur Ison, he lived here. This was my mom's part of the family here, and they actually grew up on the creek on down the road here, and pretty much all of Kingdom Come Creek from the cotton patch up was Ison's, and you know, all part of the same family. You had Marion Ison who lived right here, and that's my neighbor's grandpa, and then Arthur Ison lived here, and on up through there, you had the Henry Ison, you know, they was all kin people. You know, that's a pretty disheartening sound right there when you hear them beans hitting in the bottom of that empty bucket.
You got a lot to go.
And another good thing about this teepee style thing here, you can reach through to the other side. And pick a lot of the beans off the other side that way.
Yeah.
Some green beans are what people call a bush bean. What do you think the difference is? Are these a better quality, a pole bean, than a bush bean? Or?
I actually planted a few the pink half runners, which is a bush bean, and they get about this tall. They're a good bean, but to me, you about need to mulch them with something, because if the bean gets on the ground or if it rains real hard, it splashes mud up on them, and to me, these here are a lot cleaner.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We had a Gravely, one of them walk behind plows, you know, and I can remember plowing in that garden, and those handles would be up here under my arms, because I know when it would hit a rock, it would just about break your ribs. But you know, we'd pull weeds and we'd hoe and just whatever they expected us to do, you know, whatever they told us to do, that's what we did.
And y'all pick beans? And
we picked beans, and we
strung them?
We strung beans, broke beans, shook corn, you know, washed it and put it up. And, you know, mom was always the guru on all that, but
How long, like stringing beans and breaking them up, how long you sitting on the porch, was that part of your job too? Or how long would that take?
Yeah, once you got them all picked, it all depends on how many people's are stringing and are breaking, you know. But that was, you know, that's good family time too. You put a lot of work into this, and you ought to get a little something back out of it, you know. First off, I bring my big tractor in here and I plow, and then I run that tiller over it, and then you have to lay it off. I got a layoff plow, and then you start planting the seeds. Plowing, you know, half a day, you ready to, I got it plowed and I got it laid off, I'm ready to plant. Then the plant, you know, to me the plowing and getting the ground ready and the planting is the easy part. I mean, I like riding on the tractor, so that's easy for me. But, you know, if you start out with old cloddy soil, it makes everything a lot harder. But if you get your ground all tilled up real smooth, it makes the hoeing and the weed pulling a whole lot easier. But, you know, once you plant it, you just kind of, when it comes up and gets so high, I go through here and you have to hoe it, and that's when it starts getting the hard part. I mean, I run a tiller through it and hoe it, and if you do that on a regular basis and keep the weeds down, it makes it a lot easier. But if you kind of get a little lazy and wait a little while and let the weeds get up in it, then you're down on your hands and knees pulling weeds. So, and I tried to. I got down and crawled through the middle of this pulling weeds. And reason being is I don't like not knowing what's under there when I get to pulling these beans, because, you know, copperheads are pretty bad over in here. A bushel, I figure a bushel bushel's 28 to 30 pounds. I figure it's about 2 of these buckets I got sitting here. That's probably a little more than a bushel. And it depends on if it's the first bucket full you're picking or the 5th bucket full you're picking, but I'm going to say 30 minutes. I had peas planted on the bank back there one year, and I was down here walking around. I reached over and I pulled some of them. They was dead. I was going to pull the old dead vines up, and I said, well, shoot, I ain't doing that. I'm going to go get the weed eater. And I went and got the weed eater, and the first place I stuck it, a big old copperhead run out of there. So...
Did you chop it with the weed eater?
Yeah, I did. I killed it with that weed eater. Those weed eaters are really good for that. And that's my trusty watchdog right there. I call her Stinky most of the time because she stinks to high heaven.
How old is it?
So we got some green beans for today. How do these look to you?
These look like perfect specimen of white half runners.
White half runners are your favorites?
Well, they certainly are the most common. That's what I've grown up on, and that's what everyone in this community expects to have. Growing up in this community and my experience with white half runner beans, I can't say it was always as happy as it is this morning, because growing the white half runner beans and picking them was quite a chore. And in my house, it wasn't a hobby for us. It was a means of sustaining us, because we had to grow enough beans to can and dry. And eventually we got a freezer, and we used the freezer, but those were the beans were sort of the mainstay of our food supply. And growing the half runners, we didn't have them on trellises, and they weren't strung up. You picked them off the ground, and they usually were not as pretty as these. It seemed theirs always had more specks on them than these have. And picking them was a hard job. And we would pick one time and pick as many as we could. And what happened when you picked the beans, you took them to the house and poured them out on the floor, usually on an old quilt, and everybody sat and broke them up and got them ready for canning. We canned the beans first, got our supply of canning beans, And after that, we started drying them.
Tell us about your canning.
My canning?
Yes.
Okay, it was quite a chore. We canned in an open tub. We had old quilts. After quilts wore out, they would get so holey you couldn't use them on the bed, and we saved them to put in the wash tub so the jars wouldn't hit each other. We put the beans in the jars and tighten the lids, and then we had to carry water from a creek to fill up the tub. And then you had to build a fire, and you had to keep a fire going for many, many hours to get those beans to can. And you had to carry wood and keep wood under it. And then when they had boiled long enough, you took them off. And then you had to wait for the beans to seal. Of course, you didn't just stand around and wait, but you always listened for the lids to click, and you'd know they had sealed then.
You know, canning beans is a goal a lot of people have, and that's why we're happy to have this class to give some up-to-date and current safety directions. Did you all, were you all worried about your safety with the beans, or were there ever any problems you felt like?
You know, that's something I think about today. We, of course, my mom had never had a class in canning beans, but of course she had been canning beans since she was a girl, and I don't ever remember us having anyone to get sick on canned beans. And you would know if a can of beans soured. Usually, if you couldn't get a lid off of a can of beans, you knew that was a red flag that the beans might not be safe. But that's what I meant about listening for the click of the seal on the jar. You waited for that. You knew that meant the bean had sealed and that it would be safe. But I don't recall us having great worry. We had never heard of botulism. We had not heard of that word. Well, the big pan that's bent around the edges, now that came from my mother's house. And I don't know how long it had been in the family, but it was, you know, it was not a recent addition. So that would have been one thing that we used. Well, Calhoun Community Center has always had an interest in agriculture. In our early beginning, when we had just incorporated and had become a community action group, one of the first items we purchased was a tractor. Save the Children gave us money to do it, and that tractor was a community tractor, and anyone in the community could use it. You didn't have to pay to use it. You just scheduled it and you took it out to your garden and used it. And we had some organization giving us seeds at that time, so we distributed seeds. And a lot of people got interested in growing big crops of tomatoes, and I believe tomatoes was the biggest one. So Calhoun Community Center, at its early beginning, pushed for gardens because we knew they were a source of sustenance for the families.
Let's tune in here now. Eliza, thank you for being with us. And you often show up at the markets and the bean stringings and the gardens and things. What interests you and what keeps you engaged, and what are your thoughts about the canning and the growing and the food? You can take your mask down and talk.
Well, I just, sometimes I just feel like I'm just so bored at home that I just have to get out somewhere.
Do you like to eat the foods that you come to?
Yeah, if I help Mom, when I help Mom string beans and do that stuff, I stay in the middle of it. If I help you, you better give me extra this time.
Just from you. You've been good in both the garden and kitchen. What drives you to this hard work?
I enjoy eating it for one. I think it tastes better than any beans you would get at the grocery store.
The appeal to me is the community that it grows. We have a tagline at Cowan that it's growing community, one garden at a time. That the gardens are common ground, and it's an area that we can all agree on is good. Healthy food is an important thing, and it is a connector where there's so many things that are dividers and divide us in the community. So I like and appreciate that that this is here and something that we can all connect with.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Cane Kitchen in Whitesburg, Kentucky. I'm Callie Blair, and we're here with a informal panel of canning participants today to talk about the proper way to home process and can green beans for use and preservation at your house. This is not how you would do it to sell commercially or anything, but this is how you would do it at home to keep things safe and able to enjoy fresh vegetables all winter long. Like I said, I'm Callie Blair. I work with Cowan Community Center and Grow Appalachia. Grow Appalachia is a program sponsored through Berea College that works on teaching families how to provide and sustainability of food processing for their own homes. Today we have with us Nanette Banks from the Extension Office. She can tell you a little bit about what her role there is, and we'll go on down the line from there.
Like Callie said, my name is Nanette Banks. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent at the Extension Office here in Letcher County, and we usually do home canning food preservation workshops at the office, but this year with COVID we're not able to do that, so we are doing a little informal here at the Cane Kitchen. And we do have a food preservation workbook that if you would like to have one of these at the office, you just have to call us and we can get a copy out to you.
Okay. And then also, she mentioned canning classes. That's something that Cowan Community Center and Grow Appalachia have done for the past 5 to 6 summers. I can't remember exactly when it started. And Tammy and Angie have come the last 2 years, maybe? 3. Okay. They've come before. And so they can just tell you a little bit about themselves, introduce yourselves, and maybe tell us why you can or what it is about canning that appeals to you.
I'm Timmy Williams, and I just enjoy canning. Callie has taught me so much. I remember as a kid growing up, my grandmother used to sit and break beans and can them. She would let me help her break them, but she wouldn't let me help her can them. So since I've started with the canning classes with Callie, I've learned how to can green beans, make jellies, can salsa, homemade pickles, and and I love it. We eat it all winter long, and just love it.
I'm Angie Sturgill. I've came to the in the canning classes for 3 years, and I can remember when I was growing up canning with my mother and watching her, and same as Tammy, I would help the process, but when it came to the actual canning part, it was, nope, I'm done. You go ahead, go outside. And then as I grew up, I sort of learned to do some of the things on my own, but coming to these classes, I really learned more of the educational process of it on the actual proper way to do it, and I just enjoy it. I've learned so much doing this, and it is a good way to preserve your food that you have the excess from the garden, or if you find produce that is reduced in the grocery store to save you money to do it that way. And I've learned to do jams, jellies, apple sauces, all kinds of stuff that way, and I just love it. It's very educational. I love it.
And I'm going to do one more quick. Angie comes to our farmer's market and can get her fresh vegetables there. And do you put up many of the things?
I put up the corn, I put up the green beans, I put up the peaches, and I eat out of it all winter long.
That's awesome. And one more introduction before we get going. We couldn't do it. We wouldn't have this space going if it wasn't for him. So Brandon Fleming and he can tell us just a quick spiel about Kane and where we are.
Hi, I'm Brandon Fleming, and I am the kitchen manager here at the Kane Kitchen. Kane is a commercial kitchen here in Letcher County that was organized to help do value-added product for the local farmers market and the farmers in the area. We are run by a small board representative of different agencies, and we're proud to partner with Cowan and Grow Appalachia and other partners that come into the kitchen and use our kitchen. We're happy to have them here and would like to welcome them here today.
What we're doing today is green beans. Everybody in Appalachia, at least, always wants to do things the way their granny did it, and that's wonderful. But we just want to make sure that the correct information is out there for people who are doing this at home to protect yourselves and your families from. There are some serious foodborne illnesses that you can get from canning if you don't follow the proper procedures. Granny didn't have the science or the resources and the products that we have today. I know my granny said she had never had a pressure canner until she was a grown woman. We just want everybody to be aware that things evolve, bacteria evolves. So we want to make sure people are doing these, following the correct steps to do this, because it's a wonderful thing to have in your home. It's a wonderful thing to do with your family if you're doing it correctly.
A lot of people will say that they have never canned their green beans, but what, like Callie was saying, there is a toxin that can cause botulism. It's Clostridium botulinum, and it can cause botulism if you do not process your green beans the correct way. And only way that you can reach the temperatures high enough to kill these bacteria is through pressure canning, because pressure canning, the temperatures will reach 240 to 250 degrees based on how the pounds of pressure that you are using.
So these jars have been sterilized in the dishwasher, and after we washed them, they were placed in hot water on the stove to keep them hot. So we'll just give everybody a jar or two. Today we'll be doing the raw pack just because it's a little bit quicker. So everyone just give a funnel, and we will put our beans in the jars. These are quart jars. You can do a quart or a pint. And these beans, these are the beans that we picked at Tom Dollarhide's at Kingdom Come yesterday. So they are fresh, locally grown.
And they have been pre-washed.
They have been washed and broken already.
And you want to make sure that you get rid of any diseased or rusty pods. If they have a bad spot on it, you want to take that part away.
Right.
And not use it.
So you want to fill your jars up. You can just kind of...
And you want to tightly pack your green beans into your jars, and you do have to have an inch headspace. And there is a little crafty tool that you can use.
I'll let you.
And this right here is a bubble, air bubble remover that you use on this end. And make sure that when you are canning, that you do not use metal getting the air bubbles released from your jar, because the metal can chip the glass on the inside, and you can have glass shards in your beans, and you don't want that. But on the other end, there's a little stair steps, and it has little marks on it, and it tells you the different headspace. That way you do not have to guess. But we're going to check the headspace once we get the ladle the hot water, the boiling water into it. And as you can see, Callie just brought it over, and we are going to ladle it, and then we will use the bubble remover to get all the air bubbles out. Yep. So, like I said, this right here is probably as close as we're going to get, but we're going to remove the air bubbles. And as you can see, when I do this, some of the air bubbles are coming up. And you want to do it all on the outside. And right there, we should be close to being good.
One thing, it's an optional ingredient. You can add canning salt to your beans, and that would just be, it's a teaspoon per jar if you want.
Per quart.
Per quart. You would do, I guess, a half a teaspoon for a pint. We have, and a pressure canner will hold 7 quarts or 9 pints. So we've got our 7 jars out and getting them filled up.
And then the last thing that you want to do after you get the water in, take a damp and clean paper towel, which we're going to use just a regular towel, and wipe the rim of the jars off to make sure that you do get a good seal, because you see the little rust color material that's on the lid. You want to make sure that that is dry before you put that on. And then you're going to put the ring on. Where are the rings?
Right here. They were over there.
And
too.
you just finger tighten. Do not try to put it on there too tight. Just make sure it's finger tight. Do not boil the lid, but make sure you follow the manufacturer's directions on your lids. This is not reusable. The lid is not reusable. The two-piece cap right here, this twist cap, is reusable, but this is not.
And
Do not reuse your mayonnaise jars or jelly jars that you get out of the grocery store, but make sure that you purchase these for canning, and they can be reused just as long as there are no chips. And you always want to check your jars beforehand to make sure there are no chips or cracks in your jar, and then wash them in hot soapy water, and then put them in boiling water to keep the jars hot, and then put the beans in, ladle the hot boiling water over it, get the air bubbles out, and then make sure you check for your headspace. Dry the rim of the jar, finger tighten the rings.
we're ready, chick. Okay, so once you have your 7 jars ready, this is the pressure canner, and it has a crack in the bottom of it, and that's what will keep your jars from floating around and banging and clanging into each other. So you want to put that in the bottom of your cooker, and then add, just use this water since it's here, hot water
You want to just
to the, and each cooker has, you want to follow your recipe, the directions in your cooker. This one says about 3 inches of water, which worked out to
2 inches, wasn't it?
2 inches, right, and 3 quarts of water.
It's usually 1 to 2 inches, but it's according to what your pressure cooker says. And she said the manufacturer instructions was 2 inches for this one.
And it worked out to about 3 quarts, and this is a quart scoop. So you do that, and then we'll put our 7 jars.
Show them the jar lifter.
And this is a really handy tool. It's a jar lifter, and so you don't actually have to, when it's more useful when they're hot. You put it around the neck of your jar and set it down in there.
And when you're putting your jars in, make sure that you're not turning them sideways. You want to have them straight up and down, and pick them up straight, put them down straight.
And try to leave just a little bit of space between, because they can crack.
Yes.
It doesn't happen
You don't want to
often, but it does happen.
And this canner will hold 7, which most canners hold 7 quarts, and then up to 9 pints.
And then you put your lid on. There we go. And then
Lock it in place.
and you want to start it. This is your weighted gauge, but you want to start the cooker without that on there. This is
That's your counterweight.
counterweight. I'm sorry. There is a different style canner that does not have this dial on it. It works just as well, and it has separate weights, so 5, 10, and 15 pound weight.
And it's called a weighted gauge canner, and this one here is called a dial gauge.
So this is, like she said, the counterweight for that. But this is your steam pot. So when you put this on, you want to wait for this steam to come out of this for 10 minutes before you put this on.
Once you see a funnel of steam coming up, and it's a constant funnel, once that is done, you time it for 10 minutes, and then you put the counterweight on.
And then you start your time.
Right. Once, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes for the pressure to build up inside the pressure canner once you put the counterweight on. But once the dial gauge gets up to, with these green beans, it'll be 11 pounds per pressure. Once it gets up to the 11, that's when you are going to start timing, and that will go for 25 minutes for quarts.
So while we're waiting on our canner to get hot and for the steam to start venting, some ways to tell that if you have a product and you're not sure if it's still good, some ways to tell that it's gone bad, are if you have a jar and your lid should be firm when it's sealed.
Should not make that noise.
If it does this sitting on your shelf, like on the jar, if you can push on it and it has any kind of give to it at all, it has lost its seal and you should discard that food. One of the scariest things to me about the green beans and the botulism, you can't see or smell them. You can smell these beans all day long and they smell just like fresh beans, but they can still make you sick, and there won't be any mold in the top of it. It will just, they'll look perfectly normal until they're not. Just another second and it will be on 11. And when it gets to 11, we'll start our timer for 25 minutes. And then when the timer, after 25 minutes, we'll let it cool, release the pressure naturally, then we'll remove the counterweight and open the cooker. So, and you want to watch it while it's on there and regulate your heat to make sure it doesn't go above or below 11, and keep it as close to that for the entire 25 minutes as you can. It has cooled itself off on the stove and the pressure has come back down to 0. We removed the counterweight and are ready to open this.
And you want to make sure that you do leave the counter on the stove and not pick it up and move it around. And you do want to have a towel to lay your cans, your jars on. And then when you put your jars out,
and you can see in the jars the water is still incredibly hot. You can still see the bubbles and things in there.
but the same as taking the jars out, you want to lift them up and not tilt them and bring them over to a towel. Leave them on a towel with an inch space in between each of the jars, and have it sitting there for 12 to 24 hours before you start touching them and moving them.
Here are our finished products. And this is where the lifter comes in handy, because trying to do this with a pot holder or a rag is nearly impossible to not burn yourself. And if you look at these jars, you can see that the lids are still bulging. They're not flat yet. That seal will happen as it cools down. It'll create a vacuum inside the jar that pulls that down.
And that's why you do not want to move them, pick them up, turn them sideways. You want to leave them sitting for 12 to 24 hours to make sure they do seal.
I hope that you all have enjoyed our show, but more importantly than enjoying it, because it can get tedious, I hope that you have learned from it and that you will feel comfortable following these steps at home for yourself or your family. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Callie Blair. I can be reached on Facebook, Kane's Facebook, Allen Community Center's Facebook, or reach out to Nanette at the Letcher County Extension Office. We're happy to help with any questions you may have. There is no stupid question. Everybody starts somewhere. And happy canning. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, boy.